So, hello everyone, and welcome back to How's the Shared Living podcast. Now, this is the final episode in season 5, and it's all about you. These are the questions that you have sent in over the past couple of weeks for Sarah, Deenie, and I to answer. However, we didn't want to leave you without your house fixed over Christmas, so we've recorded a very special studio episode with some fantastic guests for next week, and more on that a little bit later on. So, in the meantime, I'm Dan from Resi Consultancy and Verbaflow AI.
I'm Deenie from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And I'm Sarah Cumming from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And now a very quick word from our headline sponsor.
Season 5 of Housed, sponsored by mystudenttools.com. List your properties commission-free and reach thousands of students searching for their university home.
Dan and team from My Student Halls, they continue to be incredible supporters of House, but also the entire student accommodation sector. So massive thank you to them for sponsoring this season and for coming back again for season 6. We honestly could not do this without you. So do go and get your properties listed with My Student Halls. It is critical that you start to do that around this time because we know how important those early bookings are going to be this year. Also, a huge thank you to Wash Station and Utopia. We'll hear a little bit more from them later. So let's get stuck in with some questions from you lovely people. Let's take this first one here. Sarah, do you want to go for this one?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Kat Austin, Director of Operations from Abodus. She asked, over the next decade, we're seeing a big shift in who the student parent really is. While in the past we're focused on baby boomers or Gen X, now we're talking about millennial parents. And Kat says she's a millennial parent with teenagers looking at university, as am I. And she says, I'm not on Facebook like Gen X might have been. I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm using ChatGPT. So her question is, how can we collectively think about adjusting our marketing strategies for those millennial parents who are super informed, really connected, really cool as well, can I just add, and using all these modern platforms to make decisions? How do we tailor our approach to that new demographic? So I know Dean and I would have some thoughts on it, but I thought I'd ask some experts as well before Dean and I put our spin on it. And I just have to admit that I forgot to hit the timer. So as a marketing question, this one might go on a bit, but we'll try our best. So I'm going to hit the timer now. So I think my first sort of retort back to Kat would be, we've got to think about UK parents and international parents differently as well. And those patterns might change. So I started by asking Tong what they think about particularly parent targeting Chinese parents. They said parents are crucial to decision making in the international market. From a Chinese perspective, this can even stretch to grandparents too, as many students have few siblings, if any. So the grandparents and parents place a huge amount of hope and pressure on their children. They might have pooled savings. They might have put, all of their last 3 decades of China's economic growth to allow the next generation to study abroad. So what does that mean for operators? They said that they definitely would include parents in targeting on Chinese media channels. They spend an average of 25% of total media budget to influence parent decision making. And it's important to understand the digital media usage of the older generation in China and obviously other countries if you have different target audiences as well. Parents tend to be more receptive to brand websites too. So hosting a Chinese subdomain and running SEO and PPC campaigns through Baidu to grow traffic against search behaviours. And it's important that your content matches parental concerns. So for Chinese parents, that's site and neighbourhood security. And they do mention as well integrating payment platforms that families trust, such as WeChat Pay, Alipay and Union Pay. And then for kind of the UK spin, I asked Al Mackin from the E Word, and he says the rise in Instagram versus Facebook is a really interesting conversation. Meta targeting is being weighted more towards Insta ads. Insta conversions are up. Facebook conversions are down, 2024 versus 2025. Instagram is less noisy, it's more visual. You can still get a strong message to parents, whereas Facebook is just noisy and it's shifted to, as Al says, a wild collection of rage bait, and it's very difficult to cut through that.
I couldn't agree more.
No. So TikTok continues to grow. There's no data on parents specifically, but the older age group using TikTok is growing. It's completely dwarfed by under 35-year-olds, but obviously those under 35-year-olds will get older and that kind of native TikTok behaviour will grow with them. And let's not forget ChatGPT, Gemini and the AI search results. We're already seeing PBSA being listed within searches like which student accommodation in Birmingham is the safest. And Google will be launching paid ads in Gemini in 2026. Expect ChatGPT to do the same as they have to monetize. Deenie, what do you have to add to that?
Well, that's a very good rundown, so I don't know what else I can add, but I guess some thoughts from me is more around understanding your content and understanding who your content's going to be speaking to. And if you are running content on Instagram, yes, some of that is going to be speaking directly to your customers. Some of it is going to be speaking to parents. And we need to make sure that you've got that broad approach and you're understanding that and you're seeing that and you're looking at it from both lenses. And it might be a slight repurpose, a slight tweak. It might be maximising that content so that it can go in those different places, and then you can monitor it and see what's working and what's not.
I think the other thing I guess that I would add is that if you're even thinking about targeting parents, that you're doing a great job. And we don't see very many of this within marketing strategies. It very much depends on the demographic that you're targeting. And this comes down to strategic marketing. You know, who are you targeting? Who's living in your buildings? Who's making those decisions? Who's being influenced? Because parents aren't always going to be the demographic that you want to target, but you might do if it's a particular demographic, particular location, you're targeting particular year groups or nationalities. So, yeah, thank you very much, Kat, for your question. Bang on time.
Well, sorry, just not quite bang on time. My 10 pence worth it is. So I'm over here in Charlotte at LeaseCon. So I'm in the US in North Carolina. They are so focused on the way that they market to parents. I have never seen anything like it. Now, I think what we're going to start to see is very defined and personalized user journeys, primarily using AI, and that's something where, you pick up, if an operator picks up that it's a parent, not a student, then that journey will be much more personalized to them. So I think that is the way that we are going from an AI perspective. And obviously the ChatGPT side of things and the Gemini and the AI search results in Google, yes, they will without doubt move to be sponsored. How you can do that, though, I don't entirely know. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, but that the key sources are still going to be really important. So that is the likes of Student Crowd and marketplaces and various others too. So it's going to be certainly one to watch. But yeah, really really interesting feedback there. Great to hear from the guys at Tong and the guys at the E-Word too.
I know you want to move on, Sarah, but I do just want to add that this is the bit about kind of when the sector comes together about and that education piece, and we don't do it enough because this is an education piece about what accommodation is being a student and what you need to look for, and no operator is ever going to do that because it's not going to be cost effective, and that's when we can collaborate and work together. So apologies, but I thought that was important.
And also universities, there's a lot of marketing for universities that I think do go to parents, but is any of that about accommodation? And that's really really another thing I think for accommodation marketing teams in universities to think about as well. Now we'll move on.
Now we go to a question from Clayre Massey, who is Associate Partner at Shepherd Robson Architects. And she is talking about study desks. So for years, they've been placed in bedrooms. However, BTR don't generally include desks in rooms. So is it time to test a different location? Should they stay in flexible bedrooms, as they have for years, but maybe change to be more flexible? Should they still be in the flat, but possibly a spot in the kitchen with sockets to encourage socialisation? Or be in a dedicated shared study room that has bookable spots, or a combination of the above. So, yeah, Sarah, what are your thoughts on that?
We got this question in pre-Property Week conference, so I did actually go and ask a few people about it. I think categorically a type of desk needs to stay in a bedroom. That was quite clear, which is very interesting because, as Claire's example, that's not the case in BTR, and we know that students are quite happy living in BTR. So they don't necessarily have a desk, but everyone kind of seemed to agree that for student accommodation, that supporting study outcomes, that some kind of desk is needed. But does it have to be as big or as prominent or as permanent? Potentially not. We did a piece of work and a webinar with Martina Pardo from a designer at Heart a couple of years ago now, and she was proposing study space within a flat or within a floor. And I think my view on it is, it depends what it is. If it's your home, what gets really, really annoying is dragging your laptop backwards and forwards, not having your docking station, not having your screens, your keyboard, your mouse, etc. So I think that there's a case for proper study rooms in floors, in buildings, in blocks, etc. but they should be geared up so that a student can just come, a bit like, a proper office space, and just plug in their laptop and continue working, which would be great all round. We want students to get out of their rooms. We want them to integrate more. Sometimes they just need a change of space, a change of scenery. And for some students, the only other option is to go to the library, which could be a bus ride away. So I do think we need to see a bit of innovation in this space. Deenie, what about you?
I think we need to ask. We need to do some more research. I know that we did a piece of research on this and we did ask the question, and that's probably about 2 or 3 years ago now. And I think it'd be really interesting for us to go back and re-ask that question and see what shift. And I think what we found in that research from memory is that there's still a big chunk of people that do like to study in their room, but there was lots of different places they study, which might be the university library, it might be downstairs in a study room, it might be in a group study space. So I think what we were seeing then was flexibility was a key, but there was still a standardisation around studying in a room. I wonder if that shifted even further from studying in a room when you've got kind of people living in BTR and seeing that there are other ways to go and study. And over those years, we've continued to see an increase in kind of academic spaces and spaces you can go and study on campus. So I think it's probably a mix of all of the above. And I think it comes down to product diversity as well, is actually we should have some rooms that don't have a desking because they might be doing a dance degree, or they might not, they might want to go and study in a completely different way. So I think, again, it's down to product diversity that, yes, some people would still like to have a desk in their room and that's important to them. But some people, like me, I went to university very, 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 very long time ago. But if I was in my bedroom, I'd probably be sitting reading a book, back when you did those days, on my bed. And it was only when I had to go and do some proper, because I had a computer back then, didn't have laptops, that I'd go to a desk and study. But now, when you've got a laptop, you probably sit on your bed and do a bit of that because that's what you've done as someone studying your GCSEs and A-levels. So I just think we need product diversity and flexibility, and we need more research to ask this question so we can get a proper answer.
Yeah, I think having visited Camplus in Rome, so Camplus, great operator, where they have Murphy desks, so effectively fold down desks, but they also have a certain type of furniture where you can slot in certain things to create desk space or shelf space or a cupboard or whatever you might need. And it's all held in storage, and then they just bring out whatever you might need. So I think that we should be moving towards more flexibility there. I think the conversations that I had at Property Week, and that actually we had on the panel as well, which was talking about all of the different sectors, were very focused on the communal spaces and how, podcast rooms came in for a lot of stick, and so did the karaoke rooms and even cinema rooms as well. So I think what we're moving towards is much more open shared space that could be social or study, and you can flip it between whatever you might want. So the more that we can see that flexibility, I think the better. So hopefully we'll see more of that across PBSA, BTR and co-living as well.
I went to the hairdresser a couple of weeks ago and I took my laptop, and they found this desk tray thing for me to use while I was in the hairdresser's tray for my laptop. It was brilliant. So, you can study anywhere, even at the hairdresser's.
Exactly. And now a very quick word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Utopia, the smart building platform that helps real estate owners protect the value of their assets.
ESG compliance to energy efficiency and resident engagement. Utopia turns real-time data into action, making buildings better for people, planet and profit.
If you're in asset management or operations and care about performance, Utopia is your essential partner. Find out more at utopia.co.uk. That's utopi.co.uk.
So huge congratulations to the Utopia guys. Now, they were up for a double awards at the Property Week Student Accommodation Awards, and they won both. So, massive congrats to them. Thank you ever so much to the Utopia guys for your support. We really look forward to you being our sponsors again in season 6.
Also, well done, Dan and the team at Verbaflow. We hadn't mentioned it so far. We've gone, 15 minutes into the podcast without mentioning that Dan is an award winner as well. But you haven't got the award with you in America. It got packaged safely back to India. And we're pleased to see. But yeah, well done to you and the Verbaflow team.
Thank you very much. It was genuinely quite overwhelming, actually. It really was one of the best nights I've had in PBSA. So yeah, very, very grateful. But it's been a hell of a lot of hard work. So really glad that it's been recognised. So yeah, thank you very much. And I'm over here in the States hawking VerbaFlow to anyone who'll listen. So we're starting a very different part of the journey as well now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And thank you very much. It took me 21 seconds to mention VerbaFlow on stage at Property Week. Paddy Jackman had a timer on it. So yeah, I'm impressed I managed to last 15 minutes there. So our next question is a voice note from Ross Halliday from RH Consulting. We do a lot of work with him with various different clients.
Hi Dan, Sarah, Deenie. Great show as always. My question centres around the Renters' Rights Bill. So with the forthcoming changes, the HMO market is obviously going to change. What strategies do you think landlords within the HMO will start to use in order to ensure that they can maintain their revenue?
So I know firsthand that there will be some shifts on this. And I think that what we'll start to see is that the start of the tenancy contract will be brought forward. I think you'll start to see more June to June contracts within HMO, because landlords, of course, are going to be concerned about losing revenue if they have a contract from August to August or September to September, that if students can give 60 days notice, they may well give notice in, say, March and then check out at the end of May. And that means that they then have the whole of the summer months to effectively fill. They're not going to be able to do that in student HMO in particular. So I think that, having spoken to a few people like James Ragg at Student Cribs and Tom Ferber at Homey and various others too, I think that they are bringing forward those contracts. So that's one of the ways that they're looking at filling those voids that they may experience over the summer. But some of them will also put up rents potentially. We're not seeing a huge increase in that at the moment. We've been tracking a few of those prices. So we're not really seeing landlords be pretty unscrupulous and really whack those rents up to make up for that. But who knows? It's all going to play out over the next year or two, because some of these, this all sort of comes in next year and then the year after in terms of the tenancy lengths. So it's going to take 2 years to flush through. But yeah, we'll see. Sarah, Deenie, what were your thoughts on this one?
I think I agree with everything you just said there. I guess my only thought, and I think we've said this before, is that the impact of ongoing loss of supply is if you're a HMO landlord that has traditionally rented to students, wouldn't you just go out on the rental market and not take the risk, and you can then just let it go to the next tenant that wants it when it comes available?
I think that will depend very much on the location. There are some areas that are so heavily student that generally other tenants may not want to live in that environment. But I agree, it's probably going to be worth a shot, isn't it? To see if you can get kind of 12-month wraparound revenue, because otherwise, of course, they're going to put the rent up. Like that has to be the inevitable byproduct of the Renters' Rights Act, I think.
But that doesn't stop you, as a landlord, it doesn't stop you then renting to students. Students are just doing it on the open market, and they just have to be available when they want it. And then it might be that if it comes up in May, March, you might get a work professional, you might get a student, you might get whoever. But anyway, as you say, I think we'll see how it pans out. But yes, I think in certain cities, that's going to be more prevalent where there is massive lack of rental housing and you just rent it to whoever needs a home to live in.
Yeah. But also, as we've seen previously, landlords have done discounted rent or, half rent, etc. over the summer months anyway, a lot of the time. So I don't think there's any rules in the Renters' Rights Act against them not doing that. So it might be that they'll be able to get some revenue over the summer months, even if it's not full revenue, rather than have those void periods. So it might be that they just get really, really clever and innovative in trying to encourage students. And I think that will particularly come in when you've got a house of sharers where some want to stay over the summer and some don't. As soon as somebody gives notice, that's everybody that's out. But actually, they could say, well, actually, if two of you want to stay, there might be a deal to be done rather than have those void periods as well. So I think it'll be interesting.
It's going to be really interesting. We're seeing more institutional capital plough into HMOs. And I think with good reason, because there is still definitely an opportunity there. We are seeing some attrition with the sort of mom and pop landlords selling up because of the forthcoming EPC legislation, the energy performance certificate legislations, where you have to hit a certain EPC level within your property and portfolio. And of course, with the Renters' Rights Bill, and nowhere more so than Nottingham, where there is quite a big attrition there in student HMO. But I think this is just going to take probably 10 years to really flush out. But during that time, we will see much more institutional capital come in. Brookfield have just joined the party. There's several others as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting space to watch. My concern is that it will mean that we have a slight loss of affordability at that more affordable end in HMOs if they do all sell up, because then students will be effectively forced into PBSA. Great for PBSA or BTR or co-living, but yeah, it's going to be a challenge. So thanks, Paul, for that question. And now a quick voice note from Paul Mercer, who's director at Kaplan Living.
Hi, Sarah, Deenie and Dan. It's Paul Mercer from Kaplan Living here. My question for you all: is the trajectory of the PBSA sector helping or harming the stability and future success of the wider university sector?
This is a juicy one. So I think PBSA post-COVID and the post-COVID boom got carried away, and I think a lot of investors pushing their rents beyond 10% in any city totally destabilizes that city and the university performance as well. And I think that's exactly what's happened. So we've seen it in various different places, Bristol, Glasgow, etc., where the pricing has got too hot, and students now are questioning the value of their degree by going to those universities. And I think we will see a medium-term shift away from some of those universities because of the cost of living and the cost of accommodation in particular. So when times are good and investors are pushing rents beyond 5%, I think that is a bit of a dangerous game. I feel like we're now we've matured as a market, and we are now starting to see that we have to focus on those longer term investor return profiles. And that is anything from a sort of, a 0 to 5% increase year on year is potentially tolerable. Anything beyond that, realistically, is going to drive students away from PBSA, potentially into BTR, but those prices are normally mirrored from PBSA. And I think that it just ends up destabilizing the market, because university halls then think, all right, PBSA have really pushed their pricing. What can we do about it as well? Everyone then gets a bit greedy, and it destabilizes entire cities. And so I think, yes, PBSA, the trajectory previously has potentially hindered certain cities' appeal, I would say, to students. I don't think that is going to be a long-term thing, though. I think it was a post-COVID boom. And I think this normalization of demand means that everybody is being much more rational. And if I can take one thing away from Property Week, it was effectively that the phrase that I was using was positive realism. And I think that is where the industry needs to be. We need to be very realistic in terms of the investor returns that we can generate, how difficult it is to build and run these properties, but we also need to stay positive about it. So I think it's a fine balance, Paul, to answer your question. But yeah, great question nonetheless. Thank you.
I think that's great, because that's a very positive response, Dan. I guess my only concern is that reputational damage of, can I afford to go and study in the way that I wanted to go and study, and therefore get the experience of studying in the way that I thought I was going to get it, the way that my parents told me what their experience was going to a university, is not the same. And that creates a cultural shift in how a generation probably is starting to see what higher education is. And I think we need to be realistic too about the impact of that, and work hard with our universities to kind of re-engage people in that conversation again, to say, actually, there is that benefit of living away, studying away. And I know this is a conversation that we go a bit deeper into on our special episode next week, but I just think we need to recognise that we have, in all those impacts that have happened, we have caused a shift in how people view higher education and how they go about getting a higher education, and we've got to combat that.
I don't think it's fair to only talk about PBSA in this conversation. I think the cost of living, I think property rental prices overall has got to, impact, higher education. I think we need to mention widening participation as well. I think universities have done, really well on this, in recent years, supported by some initiatives from UCAS, but sometimes that only goes as far as the first year. And then what happens to students in the second year and the third year as well? Where do they live then? If their accommodation might be subsidised by universities in the first year. So I do think that we need to kind of, when we talk about higher education success, we need to look at how students can sustain a lifestyle over the whole course length, not just the first year. And that is very prevalent when you start then talking about HMOs and PBSA and build to rent as well. So, I don't know, the question about helping or hindering it, I guess it's a really, really difficult one, Paul.
Oh, it's too polarizing to say. To say it helps or hinders. I think it's grey. PBSA by design should be helping with more affordability technically, because it's increasing supply and options. Like, students want choice. We know that, whether it's BTR, co-living, PBSA, uni halls, student HMO, whatever it is, or whether they commute. And I think the issue that we have is that a lot of this does just come down to the affordability piece, because we can provide as many podcast studios and karaoke rooms as needed, but I think that the affordability is absolutely key. So when we're not delivering that, and when we're pushing rents too high, it is just totally screwing the sector. And it will, I do think there are some cities that will have a massive hangover from pushing their rents 23%. Glasgow's prime example of that. But ultimately, Glasgow is quite popular for development right now. It's where we've done 4 development reports in the last 18 months. And so, these take quite a long time to actually do. So we know that is, there is more supply creeping up there. Hopefully that will improve the affordability. But yeah, everyone just got a bit carried away in the post-COVID boom, I think. And now a quick word from Wash Station.
Wash Station proudly sponsor this episode of Housed. We provide best-in-class laundry solutions that complement your buildings. Wash Station. Smart, green, clean.
Thank you very much to John and Katie and the team at Wash Station for supporting us in Season 5. We look forward to welcoming you back as sponsors in Season 6 in January. So do get in touch with them if you have any laundry needs, if you're refurbing or putting in a laundry from scratch. John and the team will look after you very, very well. So our next voice note is from Dave Amor, from data provider Higher Insights.
Hi, Dave Amor from Higher Insights here. I was wondering what you guys thought about how we can better understand the impact of student accommodation and that living experience on overall student experience. I think we're missing the trick with many students spending as much or more time in their accommodation as they do at university. Just wanted to get your thoughts on how we can better understand it and kind of use it to the advantage of universities and accommodation providers to give students a better experience.
Ooh, good question, Dave. I think we're so bad with data still, and we're bad at surveying students. There's some really good surveys out there, obviously Investor in Students and the Global Student Living Index, and of course the Property Marketing Strategist New Forum that I definitely wasn't just reminded about. But no, I think that there is a real gap in the data that we have, and whether that is qualitative or quantitative, it is just something that we need to get much better at, really understanding the overall experience. So yeah, Sarah, Deenie, obviously with the sort of vast experience that you've got of actually speaking to students, which again I'm still not sure that many PBSA or BTR or co-living operators actually do. But what are your thoughts on this one?
I have been asking this question and for this research since I joined the PBSA community in my first job at Campus in Villages. And there is a little bit of data out there, which the stuff that I've seen is going back many years old now. And obviously most of the general kind of data is saying that actually living away does benefit your academic success, it benefits your experience and what you achieve, but there is not enough data on it. And with the investment and volume of funding that goes into PBSA, it still amazes me it's not there. And I used to fight this conversation that Campus in Villages can never get the funding to do it. And I think we'd love to go away and do this piece of research if someone wants to come and help us fund it. So please do get in touch if you do, because it's absolutely a key question. I think it goes back to the question that we were talking about before, is that actually as a sector where there is kind of a cost of living crisis, it is becoming not a, yes, I'm going to go and live away. Can I go and live away? How do I make this work? You need to fundamentally show what the benefit of that is, and data and research is the way to do that.
We do talk about this next week in our special episode, particularly around the value and spoiler alert, sometimes things are prioritised in PBSA marketing over and above the value of actually living there. And that really needs to be redressed. And we know it's very difficult with multiple stakeholders constantly asking marketeers to prioritise incentives and this and that. But actually, we do need to get better at what the value is of living away at university, whether that be on a university campus or outside a university campus. This is probably one of those things that the sector needs to come together and do more of, and do it better. There's some kind of hangovers, I guess, of what the student experience was like. We referred to it earlier in this podcast, and we refer to it in next week's podcast as well. But that is quite different, and as Dave alludes to, students are spending much more time in their accommodation because they're probably not out partying so much, but they're not just spending time in their accommodation, they're probably spending a lot more time in their room as well. You could argue what's somebody's living experience like when they're not at university as well, because, is it that much different if actually all of their experience is centered towards the convenience of staying in your room and being on Netflix and being on FaceTime and having everything, at your fingertips. And it probably goes back a little bit to Clayre's question as well about desks inside rooms as well. Everything has changed, probably apart from the student room. It's still a desk, a bed and a wardrobe. And what we've talked about a lot today already is everything around it has changed. The lifestyle has changed. Affordability has changed. Priorities have changed. And types of students have changed. Nationalities have changed. Yet the product really hasn't moved on that much.
Good question. Thank you very much for that, Dave. If anyone's got needs any insights into higher education, Dave is your man. He totally understands all of the data, and it's not just the HESA data that he's interpreting. He goes way beyond that. So do get in touch with him for university trends, etc. I plug him there because he's notoriously bad at plugging himself. So our next question is from Tim Stevens at Amber, and he asks, when is the PBSA industry going to turn to a fairer charging model, not only in terms of rent, but in terms of driving operational savings? Do you think fair use rebilling of utilities will catch on in PBSA? Why doesn't the valuation of assets have a link to energy efficiency? After all, it would go straight to the bottom line. Interesting. Obviously, we know why Tim is plugging that from Amber. It's an interesting one. I think that there are some big opportunities. I was talking to Jamie Lewis, who runs Code Student Accommodation. I think they've got a couple of thousand beds or so across the Midlands, and they've got individual meters in each room, and therefore they can offer effectively a fair use policy whereby they can showcase to students, look, you're either green, amber or red in terms of your energy usage. Let's work with you to bring that down, because otherwise you will get charged. I don't know if that's, they then move that on to actually say, here's your bill for going over and above the fair usage policy. I'm not sure quite how far they've taken it, but it was just really interesting because a lot of operators do not bill by the room or do not have individual meters in each room. So I think that's where there is an opportunity, firstly, to make properties more sustainable, of course, and to improve lifestyle choices of not leaving your window open and your heating on and things like that, and using less electricity, things, basically all of the things that would make you more sustainable in your student life. But of course, the primary focus will, for investors in particular, will be the bottom line, as Tim says. So I do think there's an opportunity there, but of course retrofitting meters into each individual room or looking at the likes of Utopia, there is a capex cost to that. So it's just weighing up the pros and cons. But I do think that a fair use model is something that should be expected for students in the medium to long term. What did you think, Sarah? Deenie?
I agree. I think there's a lot of data out there. There's some amazing companies doing some great things, collect the data, like Utopia, for example. And then obviously Amber can help with your bills and reducing them. I don't know if the sector is just paralysed by data and not knowing what to do with that data. If I was an investor, I feel like, utilities and energy efficiency would be the first thing that I would look at in my very simplified brain. And, that seems very obvious, probably when you look at as many student accommodation buildings as we do. I was in one the other day, and they have the heating in the room set to 23 degrees. Oh my word, I couldn't breathe in that space. And that is not comfortable for me. My house is usually when the heating's on, between 18.5 and 19 degrees. It doesn't go above that, and I'm very comfortable in that environment. You put me in a 23-degree room, that window will be open, and it will be open all day. In fact, we stayed over Props Week in Wembley in a BTR flat. It was too hot. I had to constantly keep opening the windows and the patio doors. So it's just obvious, really. I don't know, Tim, is the answer. Why are valuation of assets not linked to energy efficiency? Because it just doesn't feel like it's a thing anymore. We all know in our homes how to make our homes more energy efficient. We all know how to keep our bills down. It's been drummed into us, but the same doesn't seem to apply to, large scale residential buildings, really.
I am beginning to think that this all-inclusive bills approach that we have is going to be one of those things in history that we look back on, similar to the fact that we flush our toilets with drinking water, is going to be like, why the hell did we do that? Because in a world where we are trying to be greener, we're trying to be more sustainable, that we enable people to have as much energy as they want without consequences to the use of that energy, seems utterly bizarre. And when I was at university, I lived in a Victorian house, and we had a coal shed in the back, and we used to have a coal delivery, and I didn't go in Victorian times. But this is a true story. And we had a weekly coal delivery, and we turned our heating off, and we had a very, very warm lounge because we had a coal fire working in the lounge. We basically spent most of our time in the lounge, and then you'd go out to the Arctic to go up to your bedroom to go to sleep. But that's how you learn. And similarly, I live in a not very efficient house now. And when I left London, we'd renovated a house. We had an ultra efficient house. We moved to an old cottage that's been badly extended without any insulation. But my kids now, like you, Sarah, if the heating goes on and it's too hot, they're too hot. They can't sleep. They can't, because they've adapted but yet we're enabling students to live in 23, 25 degrees heat, and they're getting used to that. So therefore, they're always going to want that kind of level of heat. So I think the more that we talk about this, and we have been talking about it a lot over the year several times, it kind of feels, and I think I did say this to Ben from Utopia class, is that, and I've said this before, the sector is ripe for innovation in this. And yes, you can't go and retrofit in, it is costly, but if you're building now, you really need to think about this. You really need to think about what the future is. So I think over the year, I've been trying to battle with this question, and I think I'm coming to a point where we need to.
We do. And I think the great thing is that we now have more long-term capital and institutional capital ploughing into PBSA, VTR, co-living, etc., and also into HMOs. So I think we're going to see, in spite of the fact that on a global level, it's not as, ESG and energy management isn't necessarily as popular as it once was, maybe pre-Trump. I've got to be careful what I say here. I think, genuinely, I was worried about actually getting into the country. I was screening LinkedIn posts. I didn't actually delete any, but yeah. Anyway, I'll be long gone by the time this is published, so it's fine. But I think that long-term capital is going to be very, very sustainability focused, and it's not just going to be that we have to worry about the capex of, I'm going to hold this investment for 3 years. I think there's going to be much more capital looking to hold for beyond 5, 10, 20 years. And that gives them the opportunity to say, well, let's start this from scratch. Let's do a capex project to put meters in every room, to put sensors in every room, to really focus on that energy management, to change the boilers, to do all of the typical sustainability capex that are required, and then get the data out the back of it. And this is what Tim will be also alluding to here, getting that data, using it to make operational decisions and trying to automate that where possible. So I think there is a real opportunity for this new long-term capital to be far more sustainable. So hopefully they all start to take note. And will we see bill splitting coming up again? I don't know. That's a tricky one, especially when PBSA has to fight against BTR and co-living as well from a value perspective. But, quite often BTR does. So that's going to be really interesting to see. So, yeah, thanks for that question, Tim. Our next question is from the lovely Kellyanne Watson, who is Managing Director at the Class Foundation. And it is a voice note. So let's hear from Kelly.
Given how central land values are to the housing costs, do you think the UK should rethink how land is owned, taxed, or released? And what reforms would generally shift affordability?
Love this question. So I think we've got it all wrong. I think we need to be focused. We've got so much land banking going on, which is where people are effectively just sitting on land that should be developed. I think we need a land value tax to come in quite a big way to stop people land banking and just waiting for the right price to then develop an urban project. They're very different for anything agricultural or woodlands or anything like that. If it's green belt, fine. I think there should be separate cases. But if you're sitting on an old car park or a derelict property or whatever, and you're not moving it on because you're waiting for either the write-off, I just think we need to be taxing anyone who owns land and anyone who owns land that could be developed in either a town or a city centre or nearby, so that they do have an incentive to move that on, because otherwise we're just going to snarl up and we need to incentivize that from a planning perspective as well. I think we need to ensure that planning is quick enough that if you are going to get taxed on your land, you can move it on to a developer very, very quickly. It would totally change the development environment, and they need all the help that they can get. We cannot build, developers cannot build right now. And so I think there needs to be a land value tax that comes in quite a big way.
I would go to the other end of the sector, and one of my favourite topics is later living, and I think affordability could be shifted by incentivising older people to free up their large properties and move somewhere more manageable and smaller. But we need more retirement living to enable older people to have somewhere viable for them to move on to, and smaller properties. And that doesn't necessarily all mean apartment living. We've discussed before that that's not suitable for every single older resident in the UK. And older people are getting older. So people have teenage children, into their 60s. So that kind of sort of multi-generational living is it's moving further back, but people are living longer. So they need those bigger family homes later in life, but then they're keeping hold of them. And I just think that the more supply there is, the more affordable everything gets. So that's what I would do. And I think we said this, that I think in the budget, I expected there to be some kind of incentive in stamp duty to encourage older people to move, and there wasn't. But where would they go? So I don't know that we're quite there yet in encouraging that older generation, but that is a reform that I would impose.
I think the only thing I'd add is I think we need to be more proactive around planning, because planners know that these pieces of land are there. They know that, especially if they're kind of grey belt, that they can be, or brownfield, that they can be utilised, and there should be a plan that says, actually, there's a piece of land there that can be developed and it would be great for these purposes. And actually, if you come to us with this as a planning application, it's going to be whisked through and approved because we know we need it for our local community, which then encourages landowners to actually go forward and make that approach, or know that actually it's going to be a positive outcome. So I think that, and I'm not a planner, but having more proactive approach about understanding the land that's around you and how you want to use that land for the needs of your community, which would push through kind of planning applications on that basis. And also just Greenbelt is a massive issue around land development. And obviously we want to protect our green spaces, but not all green spaces are the same. Not all that Greenbelt is the same. So some kind of classification of actually, yes, this might be Greenbelt, but actually of all the Greenbelt, this is probably a better piece that we can develop, but this one actually definitely can't be touched. So again, that people can understand how they can use their land and develop it or move it on in that way, so they're not just sitting on it.
I just want to share something that could be looked at. It's a bit of a scandal in Bedford at the moment. That is that our council, and I assume that this is replicated across the country, owns loads and loads and loads of real estate. And some of it they make revenue from, and some of it they don't make any revenue from. There are unused, unlet retail units that arguably they're asking for too much rent if nobody's in them. So that would be quite an easy way to make more revenue. But there are others that are just in poor condition, that they've just not done anything proactively. So there's a pub that they've decided to buy for whatever reason, and it's now costing the taxpayer £200,000 a year for this empty pub to be sat there and be maintained and security. We've got a Debenhams that the council decided to buy that's costing £450,000 a year in security because the council bought it. So I would argue that shifting affordability could lie actually with the councils in the boroughs with housing crises that could be freed up for housing. I'm glad you both look confused by it because it's absolutely baffling.
Oh no, don't. I know of several councils who have bought old Debenhams buildings just because they can't see it go to ruin. 450 grand is a lot for security, let me be really clear, but still. So that, therefore, 4 fantastic ideas if we do say so ourselves. But we know that the government just aren't going to be dynamic enough, or councils aren't going to be dynamic enough to really take action on this. And I think it's so... Oh, I genuinely think we could have actually done an episode on this one question alone. And when the question came through, I was like, oh, that's quite general. But then I was like, oh no, hang on, she's hit the nail on the head there. This could solve so many of the issues that we've got as a sector. Get people building, get more money for councils as well, and actually enable town planners to do what they should be doing. Like you said, Deenie, literally walking around and saying, oh, that old car park or that old, office building that is disused, why don't we switch that into resi, into office, into put a school there or put a multi-story, whatever it is, like just actually get Britain building again. I think that is the key priority that each council should have. But they're all on the treadmill, they're all panicking, they're all flat broke, and the government has to empower them in some way, shape or form. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was a good question. Thanks very much, Kellyanne, for that. Now, there was one question that we didn't really feel like we could possibly answer personally. So maybe this is one to sort of throw out to the sector to discuss it. It was from Sam Scott from Fresh. So he's the MD of Fresh. Oh, incidentally, just a very quick tangent. How nice was that at Property Week to see Jane Crouch get her award? Oh, it was great, wasn't it? And you could see how emotional she was and how much it means to her. And anyone that speaks to Jane knows how much the student accommodation sector does mean to her, and the positive impact that she's had on it. So, yeah, well done to Jane on a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think she goes into the Hall of Fame, doesn't she? That's the great thing. I'm not sure what benefits you actually get from that. But anyway, so I spoke to Sam at Property Week about this as well. Now, it sounds like there is more antisocial behaviour going on than normal, potentially. And actually, this is something, before Sam even mentioned this to me, I've seen it on various different news articles about antisocial behaviour. And it sounds like there's a lot of cuckooing going on, sort of, basically gang members, it seems like, are preying on vulnerable students and befriending them, and then effectively either forcing them out of their student accommodation or using them as a sort of an in to then, effectively create havoc. Various different ways that they are doing that. I think drugs is probably one of the potential issues that we're seeing here. I think that may be linked to the likes of county lines that are moving beyond, school children into university students. And so I've seen a fair bit of bullying on TikTok as well, which I haven't liked. I think some of this is actually in Leicester. That's where I saw it. So that's really one for the sector to start thinking about how we are dealing with this, what it actually looks like, what it actually is each time, how we're working with the police. And Sam mentioned to me that the key focus for whenever Fresh see anything like this is data sharing with the police. And I think that all PBSA need to come together and make sure that they have very quick and accurate data sharing with the police whenever there is any incident whatsoever, or the potential threat of any incident. So I would just encourage that. I think there's more to be said on it. But yeah, without us having the actual specific answers to this, because obviously no one wants to see it, but how much we are actually seeing it in the sector, I don't know. So I think if we can start to hear from people about that would be great, because obviously we need to find a way to nip things like that in the bud, make sure that we're sharing as much data as possible with the police and the local authorities as we can, and really supporting any residents that are in danger or that are vulnerable, and making sure that they aren't preyed upon by some nefarious actors. So yeah, that's one to think about anyway. Did you guys have any thoughts on that one at all?
I think just what you said, Dan, and just I guess it's making sure your teams have got the support. And again, it comes down to that collaboration across the sector, that if there's issues impacting the sector, that we all work together to be robust about how we drive change in those areas.
And I think just by raising it and talking about it, that's, well done, Sam. And this is one of those things that, shouldn't be kept yourselves, and, all go away and talk about it and share
Totally
it.
agree. So thank you very much to everybody who got questions in. Really enjoyed getting those in. And that was a really varied sort of set of questions there. So for us, that is a wrap on season 5. Thank you very much to all of you for listening and engaging with us so fantastically. Please do share that content. So just flick it onto your teams or anyone else, any colleagues in the sector. It really does make a difference when it gets shared far and wide, and it just helps us do what we do even more. So we're looking forward to getting more listeners for season 6. Please do join us then for all the news, views and insights. And that will be starting again in January, so that we can have a very quick break over Christmas. Now, a quick mention, hot off the press, Sarah and Deenie are launching their first marketing coaching course in February. So please do check out Property Marketing Strategists' LinkedIn page or their website for more information. If you're an employer, this will definitely add value to your marketing team's development, and they're often overlooked when training is concerned. I think we focus very much on facilities management primarily, and the operational side of things, or sales training, but marketing definitely needs the help. So if you're a marketer, make sure you speak to your line manager or anyone in your senior team, your HR department. Find out how your individual training budget can be best used. And our little Christmas present to you is our special bonus episode next week, where we look back over 2025, but more importantly, probably forward to 2026. And we're doing that with some industry powerhouses. We've already recorded it. I absolutely loved it. It was a really, really good episode, I think. So we had Jenny Shaw and Timothy Owen from Birmingham University, Stephen Willis from Kex Gill, and of course Sarah, Deenie and myself. So make sure you subscribe so that you get to listen to that next Friday. And as an extra festive treat, or maybe not, this one was filmed too, so we'll add it to the Housed YouTube channel next Friday. I'm definitely going to have to start using my emergency shirts on the back of the door now if we're going to film all of these on for YouTube. And all that leaves us to say is thank you ever so much to our headline sponsor for this season, My Student Halls, and sponsors Utopia and Wash Station as well. We hope you have a Merry Christmas, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.